My fellow Britons, we're going to war! Yeah! Woo! I can't wait! We're so excited for war! Yes! Oh, hey guys. Didn't see you there. You probably didn't see me either because I'm in this huge, massive crowd and I'm probably really tiny. Well, you might be wondering, Lahan, what are you doing in front of Buckingham Palace and a crowd full of thousands of people? Well, I'm doing what a lot of Europeans did when they learned that World War I was getting started. In massive crowds, they cheered. They were like, woo, yay, we get to go to war. And you might be thinking, wait a second, Lahan, didn't yesterday you tell us that millions and millions of people are going to die in this war and it's going to be awful and brutal and terrible? Yes, I did. But most Europeans at the beginning of World War I didn't know that because there'd never been a war like this. As a matter of fact, this war is going to really change a lot of people's minds about what it means to go to war. So with that having been said, let's jump right into the notes. Woo! Well, hello guys. Whoa, crazy. I don't know how I got out of that crowd, but it's good to see you again. Even though I'm here in Buckingham Palace in London, I wish I could be back there with you guys in Palmdale, but you know what? It's never too late to do notes, so like I told you, let's jump right into these notes. Now, yesterday we learned how World War I got started. You learned the acronym MANIA, militarism, alliances, nationalism, imperialism, and the assassination of Francis Ferdinand all led to the Great War. So what we're going to try to find out today is essential question 18.2. What were the characteristics of the Great War? Today and tomorrow, we're going to kind of talk about what was the war like? What was it like being in the war? What were battles like? Tomorrow, we're really going to get into what battles were like. We're going to learn about some of the gruesome details of trench warfare. But that's kind of what we're going to try to figure out today. What were the characteristics of the Great War? Pause if you need to. We're moving on. All right, now, the very first thing I want to talk about is public opinion, okay? Like I mentioned before I came in from the cheering crowd at Buckingham Palace, it's really kind of interesting. When World War I broke out, a lot of Europeans, and not just Europeans, but everybody, well, not everybody, let's be real, but a lot of people, including the United States, had some illusions about the war. Now, I don't know why it always is, but humans have terrible memory. And we have very, horrible short-term memory, or long-term memory even. And whenever it comes to war, when wars break out, not so much today, but people have illusions, okay? So, oh, there I am right there. Anyway, Europeans were excited about going to war. Now, like I said, you might say, well, why in the world would Europeans be excited about war? Don't they know how brutal it is? Well, think about it, guys. We've had thousands of years of history to look back on, and the most recent last 100 years has really shown humans just how nasty war could be, and we haven't even gotten to World War II yet. So, Europeans were excited about going to war for a number of reasons. First of all, Europeans kind of misunderstood the situation. They thought the war would be quick and with little loss of life. You'll see this next year when you study AP European history, or US history, and you study the Civil War. People had the same illusions, that the war wouldn't last very long, that it was going to be short, and people had this illusion that they were going to go off and they were going to fight and they were going to kill a couple bad guys, come home and tell their parents and their grandparents and their kids and their grandkids, hey, look at me, I'm a war hero. Well, like I said, Europeans misunderstood the situation. They'd never fought a war with machine guns yet. They'd never fought a war with this kind of heavy artillery. Okay? And they're about to see just how horrendous war is. But that's not the only reason why Europeans were excited, not just because they misunderstood the situation. Another thing that caused Europeans to have illusions is propaganda. Okay? Now, put simply, propaganda is ideas spread to influence your opinion for or against something. Okay? You're going to see during World War I and World War II, and pretty much before that and after that, guys, propaganda has always been something that is everywhere. All right? When the government wants to change your mind about something, they put out propaganda. And propaganda isn't always lies. It might be telling you somewhat of the truth. But propaganda was spread by governments during World War I and World War II, and pretty much every time after that, and even before that. Like I said, it's been around for a while. But propaganda is spread to try to get people on board with the war. Think about it. Europeans in the United States are going to have to raise an army. In order to raise an army, they've got to make the war look glorious. They've got to make soldiers look glorious, right? That way young men will want to jump on the bandwagon and say, woo, I want to be a part of that war. But I'll be honest with you, propaganda had existed for a very long time about the war. All right, so one of the things, guys, that propaganda did was it glorified war and it glorified soldiers. So, when you see a propaganda poster like this from Great Britain, it says, "There's still a place in line for you. Will you fill it?" And it says, "This space is reserved for a fit man." So it's kind of calling out your manhood there, guys. Like, hey, this space is only reserved for a fit man. Are you man enough? Are you fit enough, all right, to join the army? So once again, young men might look at this and be like, well, I'm like tough enough. I can handle it. I'm the guy for you. I'm gonna go fight for my country. So it glorified war. It glorified being a soldier. Another thing it did was it glorified war through women. Here's a post from Great Britain that says, "Women of Britain say go." Translation, hey dudes, the women are telling you to go. Are you going to stay around? No girl's going to want you if you don't go fight in the war, because they're all looking fondly at their men and say, you go fight and you defend your country. Don't be a coward, right? So once again, propaganda, trying to get young men to be like, hey, I better go, right? If I want to be able to get a girl someday, I better go fight in the war. Another thing that propaganda does is it demonizes your enemy. Now, what I mean is, here's a propaganda poster from the United States, and we'll talk about how the United States gets involved in World War I a little bit later. But here you see Germans portrayed as kind of like King Kong. You've got this hulking beast with fangs, and he's got blood all over his hands. He's got a bloody stick that he's clubbed people with. He's got an American woman in his arms with her top down, signifying that he may try to rape women. We'll talk about how that gets going after a while. But once again, if you're an American and you are bombarded with images like this, you can't help but think badly of the German people, even though at this time a huge percentage of population in the United States is German. But anyway, yes, absolutely, it demonizes your enemy, and governments like to do this. They like to show you our quote-unquote enemies and make them look not human. Another thing propaganda did was it encouraged everyone to do their part for the war effort. It encouraged women to go work in factories, we'll talk about much later, and encouraged men to go fight. But here's one of my favorite propaganda posters. Now, if you look at memes, you'll see this meme has popped up in the last week or so talking about the coronavirus, and it's a very funny meme. But this is a really old propaganda poster I bring up every year, and it kind of calls out men once again. Here you've got a father sitting in a chair, and you've got his daughter reading a history book, and look at the son, he's on the floor playing with toy soldiers. And the daughter, no doubt reading about the Great War that's going on in the history books, looks at her father and says, "Daddy, what did you do in the Great War?" And the look on the father's face says, you know, I don't know what it says. Maybe this guy was a draft dodger and he didn't go fight in the war. Maybe he did horrible, awful things in the war, and he doesn't really quite know how to answer his daughter. But the whole thing is this propaganda poster, if you are a male, is trying to say, hey, men, someday if you have kids, what are you going to tell your kids? Are you going to tell them that you didn't go fight in the war? So once again, this is government-made propaganda trying to get you to do something. Another thing is it encouraged patriotism. Obviously, images of your country's flag, the French flag, the British flag, the German flag, the American flag, whatever, were very patriotic. But here's a poster saying, "Britain wants you. Join your country's army. God save the king," right? Patriotism, right? Nationalism. Propaganda, once again, guys, was all over the place. Governments actually had special branches of the government during World War I to do nothing except make propaganda to persuade people. Wait till we get to World War II and Disney and Warner Brothers get involved, and you start seeing Mickey Mouse cartoons that are propaganda, Bugs Bunny cartoons that are propaganda. We'll get to that much later. Okay? So anyway, that's what propaganda was. So it's no wonder why Europeans were excited for the war. Everything around them told them that they should be excited for the war. But there's another thing that had kind of laid the foundation for Europeans to be excited for any kind of war, and that's just general education. If you look at 19th century education, if you looked at especially history books in the 19th century, they glorified war. They discussed war in the history books as a very noble cause. They glorified generals and soldiers of the past, almost to the point of being almost like gods. All right, so if you were a young boy and you grew up in any kind of education system, this is what you learned about war. So when you became a man and now here's the chance to go to war, you were excited about it. So I hope, guys and gals, I hope I've been able to explain to you why Europeans might be excited, like the crowd in front of Buckingham Palace cheering me on as I was saying, woo, let's go, war. All right, so anyway, guys, that is one reason why Europeans, several reasons actually, why Europeans were excited about World War I, or the Great War as they called it. Pause if you need to. All right, now, let's talk about 1914, the very first year of the war. When we left off, there was a domino effect, and countries were declaring war on other countries, and bam, 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 everybody's at war because of alliances. Well, let's go back to the Schlieffen Plan, okay? I told you guys about this when we talked about right when the war broke out. You see, Germany had this plan. They were going to invade France by sneaking through Belgium. They thought they could beat down France in a matter of about 6 weeks and then swing their entire army back into Russia and be able to fight Russia before Russia fully mobilized their forces. And boy, were they wrong. But I want to talk about the invasion of Belgium when they tried to start off the Schlieffen Plan, because the invasion of Belgium is really going to set the pace for a lot of things, okay? So, Germany invaded Belgium in August 1914, almost, immediately after everybody started declaring war. Okay, so when they invaded Belgium, obviously a brand new country. We talked about how Belgium was created in the early 1850s. Leopold, the guy that did the Belgian Congo, he hadn't been king, of a country that had vast military resources and things like that. A very small country. All right, so there's no way that Belgium has the power of Europe at all. Like, they don't have the British power, the French power, German power. They're kind of weak. So it's no big shock that Belgian forces were overwhelmed. So Belgians do what anybody does when they get overwhelmed by a force. A lot of times you engage in guerrilla warfare. Now what this means is, okay, Germany obviously has superior forces. They come in and occupy your cities. So what you do every once in a while is you snipe German soldiers from windows. You shoot German officers every chance you get. Maybe every once in a while you sneak in and throw a bomb and bomb something. That's called guerrilla warfare. It's called dirty fighting. And Germany actually responds in a horrendous way. So, here you see, guys, the armies of Germany marching in through Belgium, and the German military retaliated by committing atrocities. All right, now, when we talked about this in world history, I gave them the essential question, and we're going to talk about it a lot in this chapter and from here on in, but why in war do people go above and beyond and commit horrible atrocities? And I'm not talking about soldiers shooting other soldiers. I'm talking about killing innocent people. Well, here's the deal. Like I said, if you're the German military, you don't know whether or not when you walk into a city, you might get sniped from a window out of nowhere. So what does the German military order their soldiers to do? When you take a city, just go clean out buildings, wipe everybody out, and then there's no chance of getting sniped. Right? So, Belgian cities were burned, civilians executed, and I'm not talking just the men. All right, well, that's a very Star Wars quote, no, that was episode 2. Not just the men, but the women and the children too. Guys, I don't know why I just went off into episode 2. But anyway, the first months of the war, guys, in all seriousness, over 23,000 civilians were executed by German military in Belgium, including, yes, men, women, and children on occasion. Now, like I said, why is the German army doing this? Well, their justification is, if you wipe out everybody in a building, then there's no chance you're going to get sniped from a building. But on the other hand, you're killing innocent people that, in other words, would not even put up a fight. So, another thing that happened in the invasion of Belgium is rape was common. German soldiers among the Belgian women. Now, some historians actually call this the rape of Belgium. But anyway, this leads, guys, to a lot of propaganda. You see, the British say, oh, hey, look what's going on in Belgium. We can use this, we can turn this into propaganda and make British men, like, upset and angry and want to fight back. So when this happens, you see a lot of British propaganda. Here you see British propaganda. You see a German soldier holding a Belgian woman by the neck, and it says, what will you give for her? Calling out their British men, go defend Belgium, go defend innocent women. And here's another one. It shows a Belgian woman, a woman chained to the ground, and it says Belgium on her forehead. And then looming over her is a big, powerful German military leader. All right, it's called the Belgium Menace. So once again, the British use this as propaganda. As a matter of fact, the propaganda got so out of control. If you were in the United States, these are the kinds of things that you heard. The war was so bad, Germans were going in and murdering babies and raping women everywhere. And was that true? No, not really. It happened in Belgium, and it happened on occasion, but the propaganda made it sound like it was going on all the time. Now, here's a danger of propaganda. The propaganda of World War I was so bad that when we start hearing Jews being persecuted in Nazi Germany 20 years later, we don't really believe it. We think it's propaganda. So, you see, guys, propaganda can be a very, very dangerous thing. All right? So, Germany's invaded Belgium in the very first month of the war. Pause if you need to.